I just got a little message here. I don't know what that means. Got it. Well, hopefully you guys can still hear me. So where I was saying was Mitch was in charge of Columbia Records, which was a major label. And he was not happy with the fact that Rosemary wanted to have an album with Duke Ellington and her on the same cover in the same photo. And he wasn't even happy with her working with him, to be honest. He wanted her to do silly pop songs because her biggest hit prior to her love for recording jazz was a song called Come On to My House. Come On to My House. I could sing it for you. I'd like to, but I'm not going to. And it was like a pop novelty song. And that's where he wanted her to go. And she did not want to do that. So Black Rose came out. It has a picture, a framed picture of Duke Ellington on the cover. And it has Rosemary with her hand on her chin, laying on the ground, looking at the picture. It's absolutely silly, especially for a jazz album. Jazz albums in the 50s were the epitome of sophistication. It's sad. It was a sad scenario, and it kept going. In a little while, I'm going to go back to Rosemary, but I have to go to the next one that is really, really, really something. So now we're in the late 50s, early 60s, and along comes this beautiful singer, and her name was Connie Francis. And her father had a little bit of push with getting her into MGM recording studio. And he did help her to become one of their artists. Now, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the background of MGM. Looking back on things, they weren't the nicest people. I don't know if any of you caught the movie a couple of years ago with Renee Zellweger when she played Judy Garland. It was the last 6 months of her life, but it does reflect back. Judy was not only a film star, but she was an MGM recording artist too, initially. And she went to Capitol. That's a whole nother story. But they wanted what they wanted. And they told Connie Francis that she was going to sing what they told her she was going to sing. And it was basically going to be old standards. So, yes, she had a huge #1 hit with the song Who's Sorry Now. It was written in 1928. Yeah. And it was great. It's a great song. You know, I sing sometimes along to it. The story, though, is that she, as an artist, wanted to sing pop rock songs. Please keep in mind, we're in the early 60s. So when I say rock, we're not looking at, Whitesnake here. Okay, we're looking at what rock was then. Okay, so a couple of her friends that she met, Neil Sedaka and Howard Greenfield, they gave her some songs, which she recorded. Now, MGM was not happy at all But guess what? Stupid Cupid, Lipstick on Your Collar, Vacation, they all went to #1, and they were at that time pop rock songs. So you can read more about that in her book, which I thought I had right here, but I don't. It's called Who's Sorry Now. I have piles of books in this house. I used to work in a library, so that didn't help either. So it evolved. It was very difficult in the early years of recording artists. Again, keep in mind, you know, this was a whole new world was opening. We had 12-inch albums. We had the 45, which took place of the 78, which I don't know if you guys ever touched the 78, but you better hold tight, because God forbid if it drops, it's just shattered. So they had a really difficult time. And now we're really getting into the early stages of rock and pop. And in the early 60s, there were a lot of females coming on the scene. We had a girl that came out and just blew everybody away. And her name was Lesley Gore. And again, her parents were from Connecticut. Her parents were influential. I don't know the exact background, but they got her a recording contract with Mercury. It's funny, if any of you guys ever are at any trivia contests, and the question is, what artist broke through Quincy Jones as a producer? Please don't answer Michael Jackson, because you're wrong. It was Lesley Gore. Quincy was a jazz artist. He had great albums. I have a few of them. They're really good. But as far as production, that was his big breakthrough. You know, they're very well produced albums. And she had to fight, and she got her way. Her parents weren't for it. Nobody was for it, but she fought her way through the fact that during those days, you would have a hit or two. And when you made an album, the remainder of your album were covers. If you were like a girl singer like her, you know, I'm not talking bands, even though bands did it too, but Lesley did not have covers. She had all songs either that singer-songwriters wrote or she wrote. It's really funny. There's one song on one of her albums called Happiness is Just Around the Corner. And I remember reading the liner notes years back, and I'm like, Van Morrison, not Van Morrison, Van McCoy. I'm like, Van McCoy, that's the guy that did The Hustle. Holy cow, you know. But she fought for that, and it was a struggle. She has a book. It's not an autobiography; it's a good biography. I know Lisa had a list of books that her and I went through and suggested, and that is one of them. So definitely something to check out. So now it's 1964 and the Beatles come and everything is in an uproar as far as the music industry and American artists. Not only just, you know, male groups that were popular at the time, the Beach Boys, the Four Seasons, but the girls too. Um, and it almost made it worse in a way, because now we had the British invasion. So some of these producers and record executives thought they had to take on the world and control what the women were doing because they couldn't, God forbid, figure out what they should do and how they should do it. There's a lot of bad things that happened during that period. You had two notorious couples that were, I mean, and this is not about personal, abusive, physical issues, but it also affected um, the musical roads that these people wanted to go down. Of course, everybody knows, there's no way you guys don't know that one of the people I'm talking about is Tina Turner. So this is an awesome book. And Ike had his own thing going on. Um, Ike was more of an early funk guy. There were just a lot of issues. Um, but Tina had to do what she had to do to survive. Another one is someone who just recently passed away, hit me very hard, was Ronnie Spector. Uh, Veronica Bennett was one of the three people in the Ronettes. It was her and her sister, and I believe her cousin. I don't think it was her friend, it was her cousin, but I know it was her sister. And we all know Be My Baby, Walking in the Rain, that whole thing. But she wanted to be a rocker. Ronnie Spector was born to be like a rock, like a Tina Turner type. They both were like rock singers. There's a difference between a pop singer and a rock singer. And she wanted to rock out. Well, Phil wasn't too happy with that. Um, in 1967, the Ronettes broke up. And in 1968, Phil bought this mansion and kind of kept Ronnie in there under seclusion until 1972, with an extreme amount of help from George Harrison. George was friends with Ronnie. You got to go back now to the early days. The Beatles land in America, and they're welcomed by these American artists. And the Beatles became friends with the Ronettes. So George kind of helped her get out of that situation. He told Phil that he would give Ronnie a recording contract on Apple Records. And that helped her to escape this. In the meantime, though, back to the point, this was a struggle for these women. They couldn't just, like now it's a little different. Now things are so, girls go on YouTube. I'll tell you, I watch some of them and they're really good, and people with power pick these girls up. And then, it's a whole different thing now. There's not a lot of, run to the store and buy a 45. Although, like I said earlier, vinyl is coming back. And I'll tell you something, a lot of these, especially girls, are having a big surgence now because they are able to express themselves the way they wanted to. This was not the way it was in the mid 20th century, like Lisa said. This was a whole different world back then. And it was a struggle. It was a struggle. It did struggle up. I'll tell you, even into the 70s, there was this woman that recorded an album in Germany, and an American label caught wind of her and got her over here. And they told her, it's 1975. You've got to record dance music. Now, that's not what that album was that came out in Germany. But she did. She recorded dance music. And then by 76-7, dance music got a label called disco, which for some reason had some bad connotation. I don't know. I don't know what that's about. But it's dance music. It was dance music of the era. Okay, so if you listen to some of Donna Summer's albums, first of all, the production's amazing. As they go up chronologically, you could see that they eventually let her decide on what to do. She put out 5 albums that no one even bought. I mean, Bad Girls was her 7th album. Love to Love You Baby was the first, and that had that hit on it. I Feel Love's on one of the albums, but there's 5 albums that are like, because the people at the record label decided that this is what she needed to do. Well, then she came out with an album called Once Upon a Time. Didn't have one hit on it. Play that album. That's it's rock. I mean, they put disco sounds a little bit in the background, but she's just belting it out. And because of that, they had Bad Girls, her live album with the cover of MacArthur Park. Dick Clark loved her. Dick Clark never left American Bandstand to go on a vacation except once for 2 weeks, and she co-hosted it. That's a big wow to me, and that was all her. It was a struggle. The struggle for these women. I feel very bad for women in any workplace, secretaries, whatever, whoever had to go through things. I remember that one episode of Mary Tyler Moore where she says, Mr. Grant, I get paid X amount less than so-and-so and we do the same job. Well, you're a woman. Oh, okay. You know, and that was 1970. Yeah. Women's History Month. And I look back at these women and I'm proud of them. I'm proud of them too, because I'm a huge music fan. That doesn't, that really helps right there. It really was something, and it's something to talk about and reflect on during this important month celebrating women. That is my very long spiel. I don't know if I had a question or not. One thing popped up before. I don't know what it was because I am not technologically advanced. So Lisa, if you are there, can you tell me what is happening not to promote something else, but what is happening? Anyone have questions, please?
What popped up was me turning the recording on late because you forgot to remind Val to remind me to remind her to remind me to record.
Anyway,
all that anyway. Actually, I have a question.
Okay.
Oh, Rob has a question. Let's let Rob go first.
friend Rob from Florida, Rob?
Rob Enslin,
Let
who's
me
one of our
find
wonderful
your face
patrons, has a
because
question.
I'm
Hi
on a
there.
Rob, turn on your camera too.
Uh-oh. Oh boy, here we
Is
go.
up the camera.
Hi,
Hi
Rob.
there. I'm laying on the bed.
It's all good.
No, we don't want any nudity or anything. That's
Well, first of all, thank you very much for a very enlightening presentation. And I think you did an excellent job of shining a light on some of these untold stories about these incredible pioneers, musical pioneers, who just happen to be women, because they really, it spanned the genres, the disciplines. The work that they did was so cross-cutting on so many different levels, and I appreciate you highlighting that. I wonder if you would say just a little bit about the role of the female singer-songwriter. I'm thinking primarily of the Joni Mitchells of the worlds and the Carole Kings and the Linda Ronstadts, all those that sort of came up during the late 60s, early 70s that really rewrote the rules, not just for women, but also men, and helped usher in several genres of music in the process. Um, it's just, I just think they were so influenced by the Rosemary Clooneys and Connie Davis's or Connie Francis's of the world, and some of them were Brill artists, but wondered if you could say a little bit about that particular chapter in music history.
well, first of all, I'm going to say a lot about it. So I'll try not to go on too long. And I'm so glad that you brought that up because it wasn't necessarily part of a struggle per se, except for one person you named. Now, one of those people you named was not a singer-songwriter. She was a singer, an interpreter. You know, I clap for some of these people that are actual singers. You know, I hear a lot of nonsense. I'm trying to use nice words that, oh, well, they didn't write the song. They're singers, they're interpreters. And one person you named, and I'm so glad you did because I wanted to go back to this, was Linda Ronstadt. And Linda Ronstadt is another one who was completely pigeonholed into, here's what's going to happen, Linda. You just left your group, the Stone Ponies. You had one hit single called Different Drum, written by Mike Nesmith of the Monkees. Nothing else was a hit single off of those. We're going to give you a recording contract on our label, Capitol. Capitol, that's a whole nother, I could do a whole day on Capitol Records, but just so in case you're interested in it, contact me. Anyway, so she said, okay, and Linda wanted to do songs like all interpretive singers do, that they cover songs by songwriters. That was such a popular thing. You would get an album. Barbra Streisand didn't write songs until the mid 70s, the late 70s, when she wrote Evergreen. She didn't write any of that stuff in the 60s. You look at the album written by, Bob Dylan, Laura Nyro, all these songwriters. They wanted Linda to do covers. Okay, were they hits? Yeah. That'll be the day, all the songs that she covered, the Holly song that she covered, Just One Look. She wanted to do that. So in both of these books, so flashback to this from a few minutes ago, you can read about, and also in Linda's book, you can read about how she made a connection with Rosemary Clooney, because after fighting and fighting and fighting and struggling and going from different labels and different producers, I mean, she had top-notch people. I mean, she was on Capitol Records. She went to Elektra. Her producer was Peter Asher. Peter Asher is a god in the music world. You know, she had all this stuff, but they wouldn't let her do what she wanted to do. So they said, we're going to take a chance with you, and we're going to let you do a standards album called What's New. Well, she said, I'll do it, but you got to get me Nelson Riddle in the background. They're like, what? What? Nelson Riddle isn't going to come out of retirement for somebody he doesn't even know. So Linda, being Linda, because certainly you got to be tough. You know, if you're a female in this era that we're referring to, you got to be tough. And she knocked on Rosemary Clooney's door and introduced herself. And 2 nights later, they're having dinner with Rosemary and Rosemary's friend Nelson Riddle and Linda. And then these 3 albums come out that were like giant. And that's when it started. You know, granted, not everybody has the taste for all different genres of music, but me, if a woman, a man, whoever can sing different genres, I'm fine. I'm not one of these people where, well, you signed up to be a country singer or you signed up to be a rock singer, so you better stay in your lane. Crap. No, you're a singer. You're an interpretive singer. Let it rip. You know, that's my opinion. And that's what happened with Linda. Okay. That's part 1. There's only 2 parts, right? Thank God. Part 2, the female singer-songwriters. My God, Carole King. I can't say Carole King without saying, my God, Carole King. My good friend Mandy is listening right now, so I know she's going to be very happy with me. I might even get a hug out of this when I see her. Carole King broke all barriers as far as the singer-songwriter. Okay, this girl started writing hits over 10 years prior to recording her own album. The Locomotion, Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow? She had these huge hits in the early 60s, some of which were co-written with her husband, Jerry Goffin, her husband at the time. And in the mid 60s, I'll tell you, I had to stop for a second because I love it so much. If any of you are Monkees fans and Carole King fans, there are audio. I mean, there's a still frame photo, but there's audio of Carole King singing the demos of any song she wrote for the Monkees on YouTube. They just came up like maybe 2 years ago. I can't even listen. I get all choked up. Freaking amazing to me. Just amazing. And still, this girl is not recording an album. So, record producer Lou Adler, who produced most famously the Mamas and Papas, he brought that mess together because they were all over the board in different bands and doing different types of things. And he saw something and got them together. So he really had it going on. He approached Carol and said, let's put out an album. Her first album was not promoted very well. But in 1971, when Tapestry came out, I'm going to tell you, I was a kid. I have an older sibling, and she bought that album and was playing it. And even as a child, I'm hearing this album and I'm thinking, what is this? Wow, this is just amazing, amazing. And, now that I'm older, I'm thinking, you know, the fact that a woman was viewed so differently than a man. I mean, there were great male songwriters, but my God, Tapestry, holy cow. And she put out stuff after that. How do you beat that? You just don't. But she really broke the barriers. And I'm glad you mentioned, Rob, her name, because she really didn't struggle per se. But she was such a huge part of even helping other women break through all these barriers. So I hope I answered your question and wasn't very too wordy. I'm always wordy. Rob or Lisa, somebody.
Hello. I just put a link in the chat of Carole King performing a recording, I believe, Pleasant Valley Sunday.
That's my favorite. Of all the ones on YouTube, that's my favorite.
Cool.
You just her voice, you could hear her writing it. It's so it's wow. I can't. Yeah, you know me, at least I get.
Thank you very much. I just thank you for the wonderful response. I appreciate it. So
Lisa, can you double
for
check where
asking
you
such
sent the link?
Thank you.
Sorry, V.
Can you double check who you sent the link to? Because I don't think it went to everyone, because I'm not seeing it.
Okay, wait. Everyone in meeting.
I'm not seeing either.
Sorry, everyone. Let's try this again.
There it is.
All right, there's your link. We've got some questions in the chat. Lori DiCaprio Lee, was that the Linda Ronstadt story? Okay, so we've got that. John Banker is asking about Joan Jett and the Runaways, or do you consider that a different issue?
Well, I could talk about Joan Jett. I mean, those girls were, right on it. You got to remember, now we're talking the late 70s. A lot has happened. Go back to the Mary Tyler Moore Show. That was 1970. And, she tried to use the example of how women were not getting paid equal. By 1980, things were changing, so those four girls in the Runaway, those four teenage girls in the Runaway, I'm sure they had struggles. And maybe part of it was because, record labels rejected them. Record labels reject everybody, especially if you're young. I don't think, though, anybody was looking at Joan or Lita or Sherry and saying, okay, you could, come aboard our label, you come on to Mercury, but you're not going to do these kind of songs. You're going to do maybe some country pop. See, there was none of that. They weren't told, oh no, you're not doing this. Oh no, Connie, you're not doing pop rock songs. You're going to do songs from 1928. Yeah, different world, because the Connies of the world helped the Jones of the world. And you know, I want to mention this. I've seen interviews with people like Joan. You'd never think that, gee, Joan likes Connie Francis or whatever. And I'm using that as an example. But a lot of these people look back on the root people, and that's who they grew up with. I remember this huge interview on MTV back when MTV was a normal station, and it was Belinda Carlisle when she put out Heaven on Earth, the second album. And they said to her, gee, this is very different from the Go-Go's. This is so pop girl 60s. And she goes, okay, I'm not the Go-Go's. I am part of a band called the Go-Go's. By the way, sure. Anyways, she goes, I'm Belinda Carlisle. And I grew up with Leslie Gore. She goes, I had every single record. I wanted to be Leslie Gore. Well, see, apparently they knew what she was going to talk about. You know, that happens on some of these talk shows, especially the late night ones, but MTV did this. Didn't Leslie Gore walk out? Belinda almost fell right to the floor. It was a great moment just to see that, you know, she appreciated her so much for what she did for her to help her break into her industry. So yeah, that's what I could say about like a Joan Jett and the Blackhearts thing, is that it was a different world. They certainly, anybody has trouble breaking into the music industry, but not what the subject at hand that we're referring to, where you're being told what to do, that kind of thing. What else we got, Lise?
Nothing right at the moment. Anybody else have questions? There must be questions.
What time do we got right now?
It is 7:19.
Oh, well, that's not bad. Okay,
Oh,
that's not bad.
Donna
Yeah.
Summer recorded in Germany?
Donna
Yeah.
Summer's first album came out in Germany.
I did
It was
not know
never
that.
released here. It's not the easiest thing to get. You do
have
know it, but yeah, and then Neil Bogart of Casablanca Records, you know,
Mhm.
God knows what his real name was.
Mhm.
He caught wind of her. You know, those people, that's their job, is to listen.
Matt, you need to unmute. I muted you, sorry. Matt, can you unmute? I muted you.
Got it.
Thank you, sorry.
Anyway, Neil Bogart, you know, saw her in Germany and brought her back. And again, like I said earlier, I mean, those first 5 albums, just nothing. I remember yesterday, not a thing, you know. So yeah, there were a lot of females. There were a lot of issues. As we all know, there was, you know, women had issues with a lot of things. It took women a long time to be respected for their craft, no matter what it was. Not only for their craft, but just for being. I mean, you got the whole voting. I mean, we all know the history. You know, I don't have to emphasize that or argue the point that women had struggles. They did. My thing is, I love looking back on when the music industry started to burst, which is when the LP came out along with the 45 RPMs. And, that's my thing. I will mention something, a singer-songwriter who I absolutely adore and worship. Number one, her big struggle was she was 15. Number two, she wrote one hell of a song. And I don't mean just the lyrics, the instrumental part of the song is also extremely hard hitting. I still to this day, how a 15-year-old wrote what she wrote. But Janice Ian, who is amazing, she currently writes for various blogs, and I think she was writing for a newspaper at one point. But when she released Society's Child, she was 15 years old, and it was picked up by a folk label because she was very folky. She had the whole Verve Folkways was the label. She had the whole look. They had Mimi Farina and her husband Richard on there. She looked kind of like Mimi. She was 15. They picked it up. They put it out. It was banned by pretty much every radio station in the country. The song is about a white girl dating a black boy. And they told her that was unheard of, that she should not be recording songs like that. And it's one of the most well-written songs, by the way, too. And there's 3 refrains to the song, and they're all different. It's brilliant. And then it ends with this absolute haunting music, almost like a car accident or something. I mean, it doesn't sound screechy. I don't want to describe it wrong. It's just, you got to play it. And when it ends, you're like, what? Wow. Lucky for Janice, extremely famous conductor Leonard Bernstein was hired by CBS to air a special in 1967 called Pop Culture. And that was only aired once. Luckily for me, I do have a bootleg copy of it. He had Beach Boys on, a couple other people, but he told CBS that he would not do the special unless he had that young girl that did that song that everybody dissed. That's brilliant. Leonard Bernstein, I don't know a lot about him. I have a feeling he was a scary guy. So he has her on, and that song exploded. So it got reissued. That's funny because you could tell the difference in the original copy and the reissue. One is black and one is tan. And it was a huge hit. And that's how she started her career. But she was kicked out. She was just kicked. Oh no, how dare you? They said to her. How can you write something like that? Yeah. That's not going to happen today, of course. Our culture is different now, thank God. So
Matt, we've got another question in the chat.
excellent. I love questions in the chat.
This is from Molly Banker.
Molly Banker, I think I know who that is.
You know who Molly Bankert is?
I do. Hi, baby.
Would you say that record labels forced most women artists to have mainly covers on their albums because the labels didn't want to hear what they had to say through their music?
Well, I would say partially, yes. Now, again, like I said earlier, They did it with some bands. Now, there were some bands in the 60s that had hits. Gary Lewis and the Playboys had This Diamond Ring. She's Not My Style. And then he'd have a bunch of covers by other bands. However, with the women, if you look at the catalogs, you'll see that their albums are primarily their hits with covers, except Leslie Gore. She is the one that fought that. And again, you might be thinking, well, how do you fight that? Well, let's just be blunt. Okay. You have a rich father who lives in Connecticut. I don't know. I can't really word it any better than that. The man had a lot of money. I don't know what type of job he had, but it was apparently something influential. And on the flip side of that, also, she was being backed by Quincy Jones, who also said, let the girl do what she wants to do. Here's an interesting thing you might like, Mal. In 1964, they had a concert, and it was one of the first concerts with various people. It was certainly no Woodstock. Okay, don't get me wrong. It was an indoor event, but it was like 12 different artists. I don't know exactly. Don't quote me on that exact. The headliner was the Rolling Stones. The next day, if you Google this, there are articles, and basically a headline say Leslie Gore stole the show. Amazing. She comes out. The Rolling Stones were great. They're great. They did what the Rolling Stones do. They're absolutely fantastic. But here's this girl, and she's just like, I'm going to tell you what's what. She had her little outfit on that she always wore when she did concerts, and she just knocked everybody away. Just absolutely, absolutely amazing. I don't want to go off on this tangent, but these people, these women, some of them that were breakthrough artists, they really had struggles in their lives that they did not create, that other people created. Leslie was taking college classes. She had a stalker. It was terrible. It frightened her up until the day she died. I was fortunate enough to meet her. It wasn't easy. There was a lot of security. I could tell she was nervous. It's just hard. Connie Francis, her life, it was wow, just things I'm not even going to talk about. But yeah, so yes, the record labels pretty much said, you got your hits. You got to remember too, Mal, some of those hits were covers. They weren't their songs either. So yeah, it was a fight. It was an absolute fight. So what do we got next, Lise?
We have a question in the chat, and I have a question too.
Okay.
So let's hit the chat first. It's Lori DiCaprio Lee wants to know, do any women own a record label? And if so, when was the first?
That I don't know. I'd have to look that up and get back to you as far as an actual date. Many women at this point in time in 2023 do own their own record labels.
22, hon.
Too. Did I jump a year?
Yeah, don't.
Yeah, maybe that's a premonition.
Oh, it might be.
That's really funny.
That is-
Yeah, they are. I mean, women own record labels now. I mean, it's just the world is different. That's what I'm trying to prove. I'm not really emphasizing this presentation about, modern day stuff because it's different. They didn't go, nobody's going through what these people went through. Um, so yeah, Laura, there are women that own record labels. Lisa, what do you got?
This is something that you and I have talked about, and that's the Supremes and Ed Sullivan.
Oh, Lisa,
Yes.
I just love this, Lisa. If anybody doesn't love Lisa, okay. So they had a lot of the Supremes are known as the biggest American artists of the 60s. Now you gotta remember American. So there goes Beatles. You know, you gotta understand that they had 12 number one hits. They had a very good rapport with Ed Sullivan, which helped them. This Ed Sullivan was a show, for those that don't know this, if you're too young or maybe you just weren't watching television. It was on Sunday evenings and it was a variety show. And he highlighted the top of the music industry at the time, which was fantastic. Between Ed Sullivan and Dick Clark, you went on those two shows, you were it. But Ed Sullivan was a little different because it was a Sunday night family show and everybody's watching. And the Supremes were on very frequently. And this started in 1964 and went right up until the show went off the air in the early 70s. And it was replaced by the Sonny and Cher show. So what the Supremes had to do each week that they were on, the weeks they were on, is they were told to be dressed in these gowns. I mean, they were gowns. They weren't, dresses. They every week for years, they looked beautiful. They sang their songs. By the way, live. There was no lip syncing. They sang their songs live. And they started, like I said, in 64. Now, the culture of the 60s, as we all know, started to definitely take a turn. And everybody started to stop maybe with the pop songs, maybe pop, but now they went to songs with a little more meaning in the lyrics. So in 68, the Supremes had a number one song called Love Child. And it was about a girl that got pregnant who was not married. And the Supremes always had dress rehearsal. And when they had dress rehearsal, they would just wear jeans or whatever. And then when they came out for the live performance, because this was a live show, they had their gowns. Well, the song, if you guys aren't familiar, isn't only about a girl that got pregnant unwed, is that she was in low housing. She didn't have a lot of money. So they wanted to portray a picture of this. So when they came on live, Diana Ross is wearing a yellow sweatshirt that says Love Child on it with cutoff jeans with fringe. Mary and Cindy are dressed like somebody you would see on the street, just sandals, pants, the whole flared thing, flared pants. It was, well, apparently, according to Mary Wilson's book, Dream Girl, which Lisa has on the list, please keep in mind, these books can be, you know, you can get them at the library. Most have to be ordered, but anybody there, Lisa, or anybody can get them for you. Mary Wilson speaks about how Ed went from calling them the girls. She was, oh, my girls, my girls. He was very nice to them. He had an absolute fit. He had a fit. He thought that the show was going to get canceled. They came close to being fired from any other appearances. It was a nightmare because they didn't want to wear a gown. They wanted to dress the part of the song, of the 3-minute song. So that was now. I mean, we all know, we watch things now. I watch things and go, oh, wow, holy, okay, click. But things are different again now. Lise, how was that? Lisa.
Sorry, I had to unmute. Did I mute? No, I unmuted. That was wonderful. And in the chat, I have placed YouTube videos of both Ed Sullivan versions of Love Child. The first one is in the first outfits that you described. The second one, as I put dressed a bit differently, is the second performance. And when you and I first talked about this, I thought it was very interesting because it wasn't just their appearance that was different. The whole vibe of the song was completely different, I thought.
Do it again. Now, so in order to rectify things with CBS, and again, that's a whole nother thing, CBS, they had to redo the song 2 weeks later. I believe it was 2 weeks. And yes, Lisa, you're right. The first version where they're wearing the whole, what is known as the tenement slum outfits, the song sounds like the song on the record, which they are singing it live, but it sounds like the song on the record. When they redid it 2 weeks later, totally different.
Yes.
It was more real poppy, more like this, instead of the first time. It was more like this because it's kind of a bad situation, you know.
I mean, yeah, the first time was real and raw, and the second time was sanitized.
Right,
Very much so.
right.
It's very interesting.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
Ed.
There's so many books. I know Lisa's got a list, like I said. I keep saying it because I'm a former library employee from years back, and you know, this is a great subject, and it's great to talk about music, and I could talk about music every single day of my life from morning to night. But I want to emphasize that the library is an unbelievable resource. And even though we have technology now, they have technology too. And it just remains such an important place in our country. So I just hope that, you know, people know that and they take advantage of the library.
I think that this group certainly does. I appreciate that a lot. As Matt said, the books that he's talking about, we do own. There's one that we didn't, was Mary Wilson one I said that we
Mary
didn't.
Wilson, for some reason, that's strange.
Yeah, very strange. We don't own it. We can get it for you through interlibrary loan.
Yeah.
I'm going to email this book list to everybody so that you've got it. And like I said, we can get the book for you, the books for you. No problem there. There are also, I'm sure that we've got the recordings on CD. I'm sure we do. Listen,
Okay.
maybe I'm lying. I don't know. But yes, we can try to get those for you as well. Does anybody else have questions? I'm looking at the chat. I am not seeing questions. I'm not seeing hands in the air. Anyone? Anyone? I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to say Bueller. I said it. Sorry. Well, I guess then, oh, wait, I have a raised hand.
Yeah, you sounded like you
Really?
wanted one more question.
All right, Steve.
I'm
Matt,
gonna
Steve
I'm gonna
Thurl.
ask the dreaded, Matt, I teach a course called American Dream Songs at SU,
Wow.
which is writing about American music. And one of the things that I have my students do is go to the proverbial desert island. And in their case, I asked them, you can only have 5 songs forever. What are they? What I wanted to ask you was, what five women would you have to have as singers on the desert island if it was you as the castaway?
Singers or singer-songwriters, or it doesn't matter?
Your choice, right? You have 5 women you can listen to for the rest of your life.
Okay. This is probably going to be the hardest question I'm ever going to be asked. But I'm going to right immediately off the top of my head, I'm going to submit Janice Ian. And I'm also going to submit Melanie.
Wow, cool.
Oh yeah, if you and I would like to speak about Melanie in private at any time,
Yeah.
you won't shut me up.
Well,
Yeah.
I grew up near Cambridge, Mass. So I grew up in the Passim neighborhood and, listening to so many great, before they were famous, when you could meet them on the street and stuff. People
Right.
like Bonnie Raitt before she was a national treasure, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah. Yeah, that's a Melanie I remember very well. Who else?
That's
That's-
one I know I throw people for a loop, but that's what I grew up with. It goes back to, I love so many people through the years, and I'd hear new artists, especially when I was in my 20s, which was the 80s, and I hear new artists and I just drive to the record store as fast as I could. And I would buy them, but it's the ones that I grew up with that really get to me. So I would say Janice Ian, Melanie, Leslie Gore, Mama Cass.
Mm.
Can it be somebody who's passed away?
Oh yeah, anybody.
Yeah, that's good. That's a whole nother thing. That's a whole nother thing. And probably I'd say Karen Carpenter.
Hmm.
Karen Carpenter is a whole nother animal.
I know.
I know you probably know the story.
Yeah.
There are recordings that they did before Herb Alpert picked them up. They've put out unreleased stuff, and they're killer songs. I just don't know. It's hard because in the 60s, Steve, these people, there were so many great people. They couldn't sign everybody. You know what I mean?
True. True. And it was great to live somewhere like Boston or Cambridge, because some of those peripheral people, so-called peripheral people, to this day, I love Wendy Waldman. And if I ask 100 people on
Oh
the
my
street,
God, I love Wendy Waldman.
I got to see her live in 1978 in the Salem High School Auditorium in Massachusetts, like a 200-seat venue. And it was one of the musical events of my life. And yet nobody knows who she is. She's lost in the mists of time, I guess.
She was the backup singer for Linda Ronstadt on Mad Love.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh God, I could talk about Wendy Waldman all day. Yeah. Yeah.
And I love her writing. I just love her songwriting. Yeah.
Yeah. Wendy.
Well, thank you for being brave, because that's a hard question. I was like, I'm hoping I'm going to ask it right at the end when there's no time for him to turn around and force me to do it. Because I'm
Well,
suddenly,
that's what I wanted to ask you. Do you have your 5? Just because you've asked the question so
yeah.
frequently.
Well, I think about it because I've been teaching this course at SU for about 25 years, and I do similar exercises. So, my students, when they do the desert island list, they'll always turn around and ask me what would be on my list, et cetera. So it's not like I haven't thought about it in advance. I know I would have to have Joni Mitchell.
Okay.
There's no question. I literally have a tattoo about her song Crow, Black Crow. So
Oh, my God.
I would start with Joni, then I would probably bring Bonnie Raitt, because again, I believe she's a national treasure. I love Emmylou Harris. Grew up with Emmylou Harris and followed her all through her career and have seen her at all phases of her career. Linda Ronstadt's hard to match for a beautiful voice. Just,
Right.
absolutely beautiful pipes. And my new favorite, my more recent favorite, is Morgan James.
Oh,
If you're talking about an interpreter, Matt, Morgan James is. Listen to Morgan James's cover of Take Me to Church, and I guarantee you chills.
I have a friend that told me about Morgan James. I have not heard her.
Oh,
But
go look her up.
a
Yeah, she's great.
Friend that listens to new music, and he told me about her. So I will definitely, that'll be
Yeah,
on
she
my,
does. As a matter of fact, for this audience, Beatle lovers like myself who just spent 6 hours with Peter Jackson's, Let It Be version. Morgan James does there's a show, a YouTube thing, or I don't know, maybe it's on Netflix, I don't know, but you can track it down. She covers the entire White Album by the Beatles
what? Wow.
live, just runs through the whole album. And it's like, I didn't think it could be as good as it was, but
Right.
I've seen it twice and it held up. So yeah, so she's my new favorite. So yes, thank you for asking.
No, thank you for asking. That was awesome.
I love that kind of stuff. Yeah, kicking it
Plus
around.
people don't know, wow, Matt likes these 5 women that I don't know who they are. But that's
All right, Matt, I think that it is 7:49 and I kind of need to close the library. So we're gonna need to wrap up. Is that cool?
yes, wrap it up. Elton John,
up.
wrap-
Wrap it up. Sorry. Song cue. Everything's a song cue. I want to start by thanking my good friend Matt for being here and sharing his vast musical knowledge with all of us. Thank you, Matt. And I
Oh.
want to thank all of you for hopping on board and your wonderful questions. Steve, do you have another question? Or are you done?
That's
okay.
clapping. That was
Is that what
clapping.
that was? Okay.
Yeah.
I got it. I will send you what I said I would send you, that book list. Matt, can people friend you on Facebook?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Especially if they are, thinking, gee, I got another question, or if they just want to, friend somebody who is a music freak. I'll be waiting for Steve's friend request, actually. So yeah.
Matt's Facebook is great because each day he posts a different album anniversary with a great write-up. So you never know what he's going to post, and that is a ton of fun.
Nice.
So that's very cool.
Yeah.
What else? If you want to drop me an email, let me know what you thought about this. That would be fantastic. If you have ideas for any other programs you'd like to see us do, drop me a note. Drop me a note just to say hey. But again, thank you all so much for being here. I hope that you enjoyed it. I certainly did. Matt, did you have fun?
I had fun. I really did. I
Yeah.
really
You
did.
guys are all great. Thank you again, and good night.
Good night,
Bye.
everybody.
And